Hello and welcome to the final round of Thundersport GB for 2017. It is the Michelin Tyres Thundersport GP1 Elite and the Monex Europe GP1 Sportsman, a championship that is all done and dusted. Lee Williams, back-to-back champion, and many congratulations to him. But he's got some unfinished business. He wants to pick up some decent results here towards the end. Pretty miserable weather. Better than it was yesterday when Phil Crow, former champion, picked up the win and then promptly cleared off home. Not sure why that is, but he's got fourth settled in the championship despite not making every round. And there's a few familiar names out there, and fast ones too, joining Lee Williams here today. David Allingham, most notably there at number 95, and number 5 just on the right going into second place into turn 1 is George Stanley, of course, doing so well over at Anglesey, I believe it was, for George Stanley. Anyway, some names that you will recognise from British Championship. Dean Hipwell also out there as well, number 74 out there on a CDH Racing BMW. Number 74, the usual number for Dean. Of course, he's joined us over the years in 600s and 1000cc. Horrible conditions here though, as we look to try and get this championship all sorted now. With Dave Brook injured, Paul McClung yesterday only had to really turn up to be guaranteed second in the championship. There he is, just going through a moment ago, number 49. That's all wrapped up. Dave Brook, the good news for Dave, despite the injury and despite the fact he's sitting at home watching this instead of racing, is that he has at least guaranteed himself a top 3 finish overall in the championship. In the sportsman class, Ben Crow was already champion. That one's a done deal. Jamie Tibble, pretty much guaranteed second place, but third is wide open between a number of riders coming into this weekend. Sonny Martin, Gary Woodward, Gary Hutchinson and Sam McFarlane, all of them within a chance. We'll see how that one fares by the end of this race. A good start there, it has to be said, for Jordan Rushby, number 2 from Beverley on that BMW, of course. Former 600 contender, but it's Lee Williams that leads from George Stanley, then Jordan Rushby, David Allingham and Dean Hipwell. Good stuff from Jordan there, Sid.
Yeah, I mean, he was supposed to be taking it easy and steady ahead on that bike, just to get used to it, ready for next year. I mean, he wasn't going to go on at all originally until next year. And in fact, we've got Jordan's bike at the NEC on our stand, so that'll look nice. That's a bike in that black eggshell finish, which I rather like as it happens. It's, I think it's quite difficult to keep clean, but anyway, we'll see about that. Lee Williams, obviously, back-to-back champion. Got a good lead out here already. Difficult conditions, as you said, rightly so. Not as difficult as yesterday. Very high winds, 50-mile-an-hour gusts. This looked quite refreshing, I have to say, compared. But I'm quite interested to see George Stanley because obviously, yes, he has been on this bike, as you mentioned, Anglesey, I think you're right, but he's not a great fan of the wet, and he's gone straight out of the trap on this piece of wonderment, which is one of the pair of machines in competition, Ian Newton, EHA Racing, and yeah, very, very, very pleasing look to his riding here.
Yeah, no strangers, of course, to Aprilias, and no strangers to each other either. George Stanley and David Allingham came through the Aprilia Super Teeth and their 450s as well. Competent riders, and they've blossomed into fantastic motorcycle racers, along with Luke Hedger and many others. Tom Oliver's racing here on the R6 as well. That era of riders that came through, Brad Jones, loads of others, Ben Luxton, that 450 group, boy oh boy have they turned into some decent riders.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's really pleasing for the likes of us because you know, it's kind of the remit of Thundersport, you know, 10 years gone, and there's a production of riders that have gone to British and maybe World.
Sid, it's the snowball effect is now finally in place. This is the 10th year of Thundersport as we look at Lee Williams here, romping off into the distance at the moment in this race. You look at some of the riders now that have made it into British Superbike and onto the world scene that have come from Thundersport. It's remarkable, really. Jake Dixon, a BSB race winner this year, he's about to go over to Valencia for another wildcard ride on a Moto2 bike. He is at the moment, you know, he is revered. He really is. And I know through the experiences that I've had in the Grand Prix paddock, that they are actually going to be using him to test the new Triumph for Moto2 as well. He is, you know, a sought-after rider. Many others in there as well. Lee Jackson, who's came through. Chrissy Rouse. There's so many. We could be here all day talking about the riders that have made their way up. And here you can see a couple of them trying to chase down our champion Lee Williams. There is Dean Hipwell, Jordan Rushby. Just up behind then is Michael Brown. I've seen him a few times this year, number 67. There's Paul McClung, number 49, up ahead of another Aprilia, number 12. That's Jamie Coward on the Scott Motorcycles, racing Aprilia. Some big names in this field, names that we're all familiar with at Thundersport GB.
Of course, as you've just seen, David Allingham has overtaken his teammate for this weekend, George Stanley. You know, David doesn't mind the wet. In fact, he doesn't seem to mind any conditions at all. I suppose arguably he doesn't mind flinging it at the scenery now and again either. But one thing I would like to do, a big shout out to George Stanley's dad Barry, good ex-racer himself, and you know, I witnessed him, like, I mean, they're up till the wee hours, you know, on Friday night and last night, you know, just making sure that the bikes are tip-top. I thought it was only Ian Newton who worked those hours, but they were still at it at 1 o'clock this morning. So big shout out. And of course, you know, that helps an enormous amount, Steve, when you've got like a father who's that dedicated, you know, and you get George who comes along and he's like a factory racer in a way. I'm sure he does do a lot at home and everything, but you know, nice young man as well.
Yeah, well, they always were great families, the Allinghams and the Stanleys that have come in, and Tom Oliver as well.
Absolutely.
And his dad, great families, and they've all raced together, and the fact is they're all racing in the same team. It's kind of nice that there's that Ian Newton link to them as well, the fact that they came through the super teams and the 450s. At the moment, David Allingham is bringing George Stanley to the party here, and they are closing in on this year's champion Lee Williams on the Aprilias, riding very well indeed. Across the line we go there. Further back there is Jordan Rushby, just running into a bit of trouble now amongst some other riders. Nick Williamson, that is, number 6. Nice to see him out there on a,
well done, Nick.
A glorious looking brand new Suzuki, that looks like, for Nick Williamson. Not afraid to spend the pennies, Nick, on a new bike or two.
No. Great guy, though.
Fantastic sportsman.
Oh, big time fantastic sportsman. We know plenty of stories where he's helped people out, the direct competitors, and you know, always a smile on his face. A big supporter of Thundersport GB right from the very start almost.
Sorry about this, I'm just getting excited in the commentary box. I'm spilling tea all down my front.
Well, you think yourself lucky that you get tea in this particular commentary box.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
This is not your rubbish MotoGP commentary box.
This is not Sepang.
No.
Here is Jordan Rushby then up ahead of Paul McClung. Nick Williamson, number 6 then. Number 12, Jamie Coward.
Oh, blimey, who was that?
Getting a bit tasty, isn't it? Michael Brown's in that group as well. And I think he might have been out of the seat as we see Lee Williams now falling back to 3rd place. It is David Allingham that leads then from now George Stanley. Lee Williams with, you could argue, not a lot to prove really after what he's done this year. He's got his arm in the air there though. I'm not sure what's up. Maybe he's got a problem with his bike. He's going for the inside line though there into Redgate corner, and he retaliates immediately on George Stanley and moves back up into 2nd place.
If you watch him, Steve, he does like a tight line into in a Redgate, you know, and whilst the other guys, if they probably think that the fastest route for them is a wider line, you know, Lee nicks it back every time. If you watch there, he's always up the inside there.
There is number 28. That is Gary Hutchinson then, having a bit of a scrap there with Callum O'Shea. We just saw a moment ago Charlie Morris, of course, former 600 Elite champion, rider from Potter's Bar, back from injury. He's had a horrible season as Charlie Morris, but it's good to see him back on a motorcycle. There is Lee Williams. I mean, you mentioned his line into turn 1. Funnily enough, the first rider I think of when I see a line like that into Redgate corner is Tom Sykes, who has prevailed so often here at Donington Park in World Superbike, but he has a very similar line into turn 1 as Lee Williams takes there. Now coming up on some traffic. That's Fuge the Luge, number 27, that David Allingham's coming up on. One of many of our Royal Navy riders.
Yes, obviously he had a military race yesterday, which was rather good.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing all of the forces, of course, attending the presentation. Come on, everyone, I want to see you all in full kit. None of this copping off.
No.
Let's get your full kit out.
Absolutely.
And a few bevies
Smile
over
for
the
the
presentation in
camera.
January. So, more traffic to deal with here, a bit of a moment. But has to be said, Lee Williams there in second place, just trying to find a way past number 37, Stephen Patterson. Is just regrouping a bit here in this race. They've gone past George Stanley again. Such tricky conditions. So easy to talk about it sitting from a commentary box, but this is so hard.
Well, of course, there's something very unusual about this race, Steve. When can you remember ever GP1 being the first race of the day? Like never, that's why. So it was kind of their turn, because after 10 years it was their turn to go out first.
Yeah, that's never happened before, has it? No, I mean, not even since the year dot, not 2008
never.
or anything. So.
No. So the fact that it is due to dry out, they kind of knew that, you know, following warm-up, that they were going to have a wet race.
Oh well, let's get out of bed a little earlier today then.
They did indeed.
What goes around comes around. Down across the start-finish line we go. There is Paul McClung, and a couple of ups and downs this year, Paul McClung, but all in all, a good first season in GP1. He will finish the year up second overall, although it should be said that that is largely due to the fact that Dave Brooke is of course out injured. There is Jordan Rushby just going underneath number 122. That's Terry Merritt, and in this group, including Charlie Morris there as well, we just quickly saw number 9, Paul Charman. He's having some fun. A lot of Sportsman riders with a lot to play for here in these horrible conditions. Third in the championship there, you can see Nick Williamson as well. Number 6 just up the inside of Terry Merritt.
I don't know if you noticed there, Steve, but number 12 on the Scott Motorcycles Aprilia has got a 10-second penalty for a yellow flag infringement. So his actual place in the race points-wise is going to be, or his place as you see him is going to be different to where he is time-wise.
I always feel sorry for riders that, I mean, rules are rules. If you've overtaken under a yellow flag, you're going to get a penalty, and it deserves to be the case. But I do have some sympathy sometimes with riders in these conditions when that happens, because you could be fully committing to an overtaking manoeuvre, see a yellow flag last minute, and the last thing you're going to do is grab a handful of brakes.
You are right, but to be fair, race director Dave Stewart he's one of the few people who does firmly take that into consideration, and when that would have been called in by corner commander Marshall, the first thing he would have done would have looked for an action replay, which here at Donington you've got cameras everywhere, you can call that back.
I suppose if you as the rider have done that and you were to allow the rider through again, you'd probably be let off as well, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would,
So
yeah. If you'd have let because you'd have your arm up, let him through, sorry, made a mistake, and you wouldn't get that penalty.
This is an absolute melee going on
I
here.
know.
Oh, it's that Dixon! Oh, he was
Oh.
lucky there. He was lucky boy, Nick Williamson. He's gone down the road, but he almost got run over. Just on the exit there of the old hairpin, there's a group of riders all together. It was bound to end a bit like this, but how pleasing it is to see Nick Williamson up and, let's just say, limping away from that accident.
Well, Nick, we were just talking about him, weren't we?
Out front, it is David Allingham and Lee Williams. So, Lee Williams wanting to try and claim a big scalp here. There you see the crash, and is that Charlie Morris?
Oh, how well did he do?
That's Charlie Morris avoiding action.
Well done, Charlie.
Yeah, that really difficult to do sometimes, especially when you're on the wet grass as well. But yes, well done
Yeah,
to
because
Charlie.
normally you fall down as well.
Seen it so many times, haven't we, going wrong. High-tech coatings on the side of Lee Williams' bike, then he's looking to try and get another race win to add to his growing tally in GP1. He's trying to find a way of closing in on David Allingham without just pushing it too far. Down into the old hairpin we go. Dean Hipwell, incidentally, we've not seen too much of him since the opening laps. He's still inside the top 5. He's up ahead of Michael Brown.
Oh, by the way, Steve, I'll tell you who came and saw me this morning. I was delighted to see him. Speaking of number 12, Jamie is on, obviously, Nico Malwini's bike, isn't he? And he's travelled over, especially to just come and see everybody. Yes, he's on crutches and there's still a way to go because it was awful injuries he had. But it was just so great to see him. Lost a bit of weight, he has, bless him. But really so nice to see the lad. Absolute diamond of a fella.
Yeah, we all like Nico Malwini, so best wishes to him and hope you fix soon, mate. It just goes to show you that this can be a championship that bites you. There is George Stanley, still in the mix here, still on the podium. Just saw a moment ago, I tell you, a rider who's having a really good race here. Adverse conditions, and Matt Stevenson is fine. He's having a really good ride here. Number 164. He's got up ahead of Terry Merritt, and that means he's leading the Sportsman. So good job from Matt Stevenson. He's up against some pretty decent riders, it has to be said here in this field. There is your race leader though, David Allingham, and I think he's just asked a bit too much of Lee Williams in this race. Really solid performance from him. Number 28 there, just being lapped, is Gary Hutchinson. Not often that you see Gary being lapped. Lee Williams second, and then of course the other Aprilia there of George Stanley. It looks like your top 3 here is just about nailed on, but in conditions like this, of course, you never really know. You can't count your chickens.
Well, of course, Lee Williams, he did have a little dump yesterday, so he won't want to dump his bike again. Just a small mistake, nothing much, but you know, he wasn't hurt and the bike wasn't heavily damaged.
That was Paul Charman, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it looked like it. I'm not sure. Can't be 100%, but it might not have been. My eyes might be deceiving me. Anyway, the rider was upright, looking like he was going to try and rejoin. Across the line there, then checkered flag is out. David Allingham returns to Thundersport and returns to winning ways. He takes the GP1 Race 1 victory. Up ahead there of Lee Williams, and third does go to George Stanley. So winning return to Thundersport GB for David Allingham. Number 95, of course, the rider from Derry in Northern Ireland, ahead of Lee Williams, George Stanley. Dean Hipwell was 4th, Michael Brown 5th, and Paul Michelin 2nd in this year's championship, 6th in that race. There's your top 3 elite riders then, Allingham, Williams, Stanley. And fair play to Matt Stevenson. He was 7th overall and 1st in the Sportsman, ahead of Terry Merritt and Andrew Pollard. We'll be back with race 2. Let's see if Allingham can make it a double here at Donington in a moment. Final race of the year coming up. Michelin tyres, Thundersport GP1 Elite and the Monex Europe Sportsman as well. The only thing to really be decided at the end of this is who finishes 3rd in the Sportsman Championship. The points table will be up at the end, you'll find out, but a lot of pride at stake anyway to end this season off with a decent result. You see there, number 7, and that is Gary Johnson. He is out there having a play, of course. He'll be having a good season. Next year he'll be looking towards the TT and much else besides. And he's just on the middle of that front row there. So, will David Allingham get another victory? Number 95, can George Stanley have a say? It's drier here, the sun is out, it's still bitterly cold. The champion there, number 94, Lee Williams, is in the mix into turn 1. A nightmare start for Paul Michelin. Wrestling away he was, trying to keep his front wheel down on the deck.
Bucking Bronco,
It really was, yeah. But eventually he managed just to tip it into turn number 1. There's still some horrible looking clouds over there, just as you looked over from Hollywood. But it is David Allingham that leads from George Stanley, Lee Williams, then Gary Johnson, number 7. A little bit of a look round there for, I don't understand what was going on there. That was George Stanley. looking around and losing 2 or 3 different places.
As
He's got
usual.
a problem.
Every time somebody looks round, they lose 1 or 2 places.
Gary Johnson's having a good look round as well. He can't quite seem to get into any rhythm in the early stages. He's got his arm up. So Gary Johnson, has he got a problem here as well, perhaps, on this opening lap as the wind blows around there at Coppice Corner? Onto the back straight, then we go. The champion Lee Williams it is that has the lead to get ahead of Paul McClung. Paul McClung on the slipstream, though, floats through to the front. Second in this year's championship, first in the race. Allingham is then third. Dean Hipwell has moved up to fourth. Paul Charman, number 9 there, is up into 5th place as both Hipwell and Allingham go side by side on the start-finish straight here at Donington Park.
After that disastrous start, how on earth did Paul McClung pull through the field and get to the front? It's unbelievable.
I'm just not sure what's happened. We've got waved yellow flags. I just wonder if it's so damp down towards Craner Curves that a few of them were tiptoeing around. But McClung really has done well, you're right. I mean, he was, what was he, 8th or 9th into turn 1?
Easy that.
Superb stuff from him. There is Charman. Stanley then, struggling in the opening few laps. He's up there ahead of Jamie Coward. And so, good stuff. And Rory Parker's up there as well. Not a bad start to the race from the Lacing Racing, Kawasaki. Onto McLean's and up towards Coppice, the blind entry and approach. Ever so easy to go wrong there. And now back onto the back straight we go. It is Williams that's trying to now get side by side with Paul McClung. Dean Hipwell is there closing on them,
Tasty.
but McClung is really late on the brakes. Unusual riding style Paul McClung has got. Sort of sits upright. It's a bit Doohan-esque at times. Onto the start finish straight we go, and Dean Hipwell is capitalising here. He's really closing in. Number 74 there in 3rd place. He just looks at it, doesn't happen. Lee Williams tied the line as he did in race 1. He goes through into the lead, then ahead of Paul McClung, and now Dean Hipwell is really on terms with him. No sign in the early stages of this race of the 2 EHA Racing.
I can hear the Jaws music. I can, honestly. They're there. Trust me, I reckon they're just getting those tyres warmed up. I think for some reason they both seem to be just a little bit nervous about throwing them into the gravel trap, but I think you'll find they're there. They're not far. You'll see. There we go. Let's see them.
Well, that's one of them.
There's the other one behind.
Paul Charman is also up there inside the top 5.
Paul's doing really well.
So this race at the moment then between these 3 for the time being. It's a long race though, this 16 laps of this Donington Park circuit, the national circuit. Number 38 there is Andrew Pollard. A bit further back on the podium earlier in the Sportsman class, it's Paul McClung that leads then from Dean Hipwell. In 3rd place is Lee Williams, number 94.
Proper dust up, isn't it?
Good dust up, yeah, it really is. Oh, a bit out of shape there from Dean Hipwell, and likewise Lee Williams as they all come across the line here looking to try and make a way through. 2 BMWs and a Kawasaki scrapping away. Paul McClung leads then. Dean Hipwell taking a slightly wider approach into turn 1. Lee Williams is there as well. In 4th is across the line, it was David Allingham, then Paul Charman, and then George Stanley. There is Jamie Tibble, number 75. Looks like he's wrapped up 2nd overall in the Sportsman Championship. Number 11 is Will Harper, former 600 rider, of course, so he's just acclimatising to life on 1000cc. Beautiful Suzuki
Glued
they
together,
are.
aren't they, this lot?
Well, whilst this lot are dusting each other up, David Allingham is creeping closer in the background on his Aprilia. Syd was right, they are coming. There he is, up into Coppice Corner. Further back there is Matt Stevenson. Great result for him in the wet earlier on. 7th overall, winner in the Sportsman class. He's leading the Sportsman class here as well, I think, as Dean Hipwell goes through to take the lead. Number 74, the rider from Doncaster. Paul McClung in 2nd. In the slipstream again is Lee Williams. There is David Allingham, and on that lap he took at least half a second out of this lot. He is closing in. The Northern Irishman as once again Williams takes that tight approach into turn 1, and just that is all music to the ears of David Allingham in 4th. There's Charlie Morris and Michael Brown. Those guys are just inside the top 10 at the moment of this race. It's Hipwell still that leads, number 74 from 94, the champion, double champion Lee Williams. or treble champion if you like, because of course he was the Formula 600 champion the year before he moved up.
Yeah, that's some record, Steve, and he's contesting it again next year. Unbelievable.
3 championships on the badge.
Oh.
Can't sniff at that. David Allingham really is closing on that group now, and I'll tell you something else. George Stanley, you were right, Sid, he has also now finally got into some sort of motion, and he's now passing, I think, through on the rest of the field, and I think he could join his teammate for this weekend in closing these guys down. There's still a bit of race left here for anything to happen, and there is David Allingham immediately on terms here with Paul McClung. In the background there you just saw George Stanley as well, so these two just got a gap on McClung. Williams it is, the champion, that takes the lead into turn 1 ahead of Dean Hipwell, and a couple of bike lengths back to David Allingham now, who's gone through on Paul McClung into 3rd, and George Stanley monitoring all of this in 5th. He's got some work to do, George Stanley, but
he's fast, you know. We've seen him before. He can put in fast laps once everything's up to speed, and he's happy with the bike, temperatures and everything else, and he knows what grip he's got. He's not afraid of putting in the lap times.
They're all closing up together here. This could be an 8-wheel scrap for the lead in a moment, because David Allingham has bridged that gap. He's got traffic up ahead. That should fall okay for them on the back straight. We'll find out in a moment. A bit further back, there is Charlie Morris, ahead of Rory Parker, number 90. Rory Parker having a good ride here. A resident from the Isle of Man, of course. But Williams it is that still has the advantage. The champion, Allingham now, up into 2nd place on his EHA Racing Aprilia. He's really getting into the motion of things now, and across the line, I'll tell you what, the pace is hot. George Stanley too. These guys are not far off the lap record that was set some time ago by Jesse Traylor.
In much nicer conditions.
In very warm conditions, yeah. They're into the low 109s here. This is a hot pace being run in the final race of the year in the GP1s. There is your race leader, Lee Williams. Bit of traffic here, might not fall too nicely for them. Dean Hipwell.
He's going to be woken up.
Hipwell's back in 2nd place, number 74. Number 95 in 3rd is David Allingham. And then traffic there, I'll tell you what, if you're the back marker in that, you don't want to be there. Oh, he's being swallowed up. He is really being swallowed up. That is a nightmare for him. George Stanley is now there with them as well. He's up into 4th place. What a lap that was from George Stanley. He is in the money here. Number 5, keep an eye on him. There he is, just making his way on the back straight now. It's Williams from Hipwell, then McClung, who's a demon on the brakes down here,
isn't he?
Into this chicane that leads us on to the national start-finish straight.
I prefer this national circuit, much more flowing, isn't it?
Well, it's providing us with some proper racing here. 5 extremely good riders that have all won races before with Thundersport GB, all going for glory here in GP1. There doesn't look to be an awful lot of difference between the Kawasaki's, the BMWs and the Aprilias here in terms of speed either. What a race this is to say goodbye to the 2017 season.
I'm delighted with this.
Lee Williams, of course, he might have the championship, but there's a bit of pride at stake. There's a bit of jostling going on a bit further back there as well. I think that's Aprilia change there. George Stanley has moved ahead of David Allingham. Number 5 is up ahead of 95 then. Stanley is pace on that last lap. He was three quarters of a second quicker than anyone else on that last lap alone. Into Coppice Corner. Was there a bit of a moment there for Lee Williams? I think he just had a bit of a wobble, and he looks over his shoulder as well. McClung it is that leads.
I'll lose him 2 places.
He's lost 1. Dean Hipwell goes through on him. Just seems to lose a bit of traction.
I told you. as soon as you look round, I have no idea what riders do it.
I think Lee was just a bit worried. He had a moment out of the seat into coming out of Coppice Corner. Either way, this is a proper race. Here is George Stanley aggressively up the inside of Dean Hipwell into turn 1. The money now, I mean, it looked like, 6-7 laps ago, you wouldn't go anywhere near a bet on George Stanley. Now you might put your house on him. He is flying through the pack. There is Morris still with Parker and Brown. Matt Stevenson a bit further behind them as well.
This is tight as well, a big melee.
Stephen Parsons is also part of that group. Don't forget, the old Giraffe Racing, Stephen Parsons.
Yeah.
Here is the race then for the front. This is not the first lap. This is getting into double figures now in terms of laps, and we've not got much left in this one. Paul McClung's having a great ride. He leads it from George Stanley. Onto the back straight we go. Further back there is Paul Charman. He's inside the top 8. No slouch, Paul Charman. It's a good result for him, and look at this lot here now, breaking into the chicane. Paul McClung, last of the late breakers, still just about has this one from George Stanley. Lee Williams now has fallen outside the top three. Across the line they go. In fact, he's at the back of this group. They're all trying to weave around, find some slipstream, and up the inside again goes George Stanley, but he runs in a bit wide. Paul McClung tries to get him on the cutback, not enough room. This is superb stuff here. The Aprilia's won a 1-2 finish, and up the inside there, bravely goes David Allingham into Hollywood. That is fast. Ferocious stuff here in GP1. Lee Williams there, doesn't want to hang around in fifth anymore. He's trying to make a move on Dean Hipwell, and George Stanley's trying to check out here. Brilliant stuff. There is Charlie Morris, just up ahead of Michael Brown and Rory Parker. Those guys are just in and around 8th, 9th, 10th. Up ahead of them, Gary Johnson still in this race, but obviously not able to keep up with this brilliant pace that is being shown to us at the front. So, this is the battle. Stanley it is that leads from Allingham. And I'll tell you what, Sid, these two look like they might just be able to peel away from the rest here.
I don't know if anybody's going to peel away from anyone.
Oh, it's a bit hot into the chicane there for Paul McClung. Dean Hipwell and Lee Williams will see that. They'll have a chance. Look at the two Aprilias. They're away with it. These guys are having a proper ding-dong for third. Paul McClung, Dean Hipwell, Lee Williams, a sandwich in between them. Into turn one, he sits up Dean Hipwell.
How do you like it?
Brilliant stuff here. Absolutely amazing racing in GP1. The two EHA Racing Aprilia boys, though, having got heat into their tyres, having got into their flow and into their rhythm, and having got onto lap record pace, are clearing off. That is it. They've got their tickets, they've checked out.
Yeah, they're definitely away with it, aren't they?
Who will win between George Stanley and David Allingham? Allingham won race 1. George Stanley looks at the moment favourite to win race 2.
I can just see the corners of Ian Newton's mouth starting to reach each ear.
Well, he'll want to make sure they both see the checkered flag.
Yeah.
A bit of a wobble from George Stanley on the exit of Coppis, but he remains out front. David Allingham looking to try and close the gap down a bit. Number 111 there is Sonny Martin. He's being lapped by the leading group. Over the line we go once more, and the last lap flag is out. These guys can only scrap for third. It will be between number 5 and 95 for the race win. The bike shaking its head there. George Stanley's. That might just give a bit of a chance and a glimmer of hope to David Allingham as they make their way around Hollywood. It's going to be a 1-2 here surely for the Aprilias. And George Stanley at the moment is in the box seat.
Now, you wouldn't have expected to hear that with Sonny Martin as no slouch to be lapped by these boys. These boys are not hanging about.
They are not, and there is absolutely no holding back there from George Stanley either. This is that scrap once again for Charlie Morris and Michael Brown. But who will get the victory and who will win that battle for third between Williams, McClung and Hipwell as well? Onto the back straight we go then. This is it, last chance saloon. Surely Allingham is too far away. I think he is. There's no way he's going to get this one done. He might just have to wave the white flag. The checkered flag is out. We've been treated to a proper encounter here. The final race of the year goes to George Stanley. Brilliant racing from the two Aprilia riders. In third here in the background, it's going to be close across the line. Just going to Paul McClung. Ahead of this year's champion, Lee Williams, and Dean Hipwell there in fifth. Brilliant stuff from all five of those. Take a bow. Thank you very much. Gary Johnson, TT winner, wasn't able to get close in the end, in sixth place. There's the smiles on the faces, and rightly so. Thank you very much for treating us to that. In the Sportsman, Stevenson won it again from Terry Merritt and Jamie Tibble. There's the confirmation then of the points for this year. Lee Williams the champion from Paul McClung, Dave Brooke, Phil Crow, Billy Mellor and Ben Crow. That's your top six overall. And Ben Crow was the champion also in the Sportsman Championship. He had a good year. Jamie Tibble was second, and Sonny Martin there did end up taking third overall in the Sportsman Championship despite being lapped. Gary Hutchinson was fourth, Woodward had to set off for fifth, and Sam McFarlane sixth. Let's pack up, let's go home. Thanks for joining us. It's been a thrilling 2017. We'll see you next year.